In all of nature's grand duels between nobility and armor, creatures clad in metallic shells seem forever yearning for the most piercing sunlight, while the fragrance of ancient blossoms is always burdened with too much romantic clamor. Yet, as the final twilight of the Bulgarian Rose Valley was diluted by soft moonlight, and the vast hillsides of Damascus roses bloomed in silence against the chilling night breeze, a single insect made the most anomalous choice. Rather than soaring high into the air to contest for sweet fruits under the rising stars like his peers, he chose to remain alone in the deep shadows of the lowliest sepals, letting the cool night dew slowly permeate his unyielding, emerald shell. Tonight, by the gentle, dancing glow of the hearth, let us immerse ourselves in this tale that requires no effort to remember, and wander together into the true chronicle of his life. This scarab beetle was known to the winds of the valley as Os. He was once the champion of his entire colony, bearing the sturdiest armor and making the loudest, resonant roar in flight, his existence originally nothing less than a ceaseless march of territorial expansion. Yet at this very moment, he merely perches in absolute stillness within the heart of a plump Damascus rose. He no longer spreads those wings that brought him countless glories, and no longer resists the encroaching, irreversible weariness carried by the night wind. His life did not follow the cutthroat script of the wild toward a dark abyss of destruction. Instead, with an exquisitely tender, restrained, yet profoundly noble posture, cradled within a rich and soothing aroma, he softly drifted into an eternal sleep. This is by no means a tragic end filled with regret, but rather a warm harbor of the soul he had long contemplated and willingly embraced, a midnight parable of letting go of disguises, healing spiritual tension, and returning to the embrace of the earth. The fractures of destiny often manifest at the very zenith of celebrated glory. For Os, it occurred on an afternoon in the height of midsummer when the sunlight was blindingly hot, bordering on cruel. In those days, Os possessed the most breathtaking metallic armor in the entire Damascus Rose Valley. Under the sun, he resembled a fluid, glittering emerald, evoking intense envy wherever his shadow fell. The law of the beetle world was cold and monotonous. They had to rely on their unyielding carapaces to crash against rivals, plundering the highest and most sun-drenched branches to validate their brute strength and primal dignity. Os had once devoutly revered this rigid cosmic order, believing the entire purpose of existence was distilled within endless victories, ruthlessly appending every competitor from the petals with the hard horn upon his brow. Until that day, when he contested for a single flower blooming at the absolute summit of a branch, the largest, most voluptuous Damascus rose, engaging in a terrifying, life-or-death duel with a gargantuan longhorn beetle from the Black Forest. It was a contest with no retreat. Two heavily armored gladiators collided with frantic fury upon a narrow stem, each impact of their hard shells resounding with a sharp, teeth-gritting metallic roar. The sun baked their carapaces until they were scalding hot, the surrounding air was thick with the bitter scent of crushed leaf sap, the web of power and might locking them tightly within this cruel coliseum. Os emerged victorious at last, though paying the toll of a deep, prominent scratch mark across his shell. He stepped as a conqueror onto that proudest, most exquisite Damascus rose in the valley. Yet, as he stood utterly exhausted upon those coveted, interweaving white and pink petals, no surge of ecstasy filled his heart. Instead, he was met by an overwhelming, tidal wave of emptiness. Looking down, he saw that his prized emerald armor was webbed with microfissures, while the innocent rose beneath him had lost several petals in the violent clash, its broken stems weeping translucent, glistening sap. At that exact moment, as the scorching sun beat down on his scalding body, Os experienced an unprecedented, stinging ache, not of physical trauma, but the audible fracturing of the very belief that had sustained his entire life, splitting wide open amidst the rich perfume of the rose. Following that Pyrrhic victory, the days in the valley shifted into completely different hues through Os's compound eyes. Those fierce competitions that once made his blood boil now appeared utterly noisy and hollow. Every morning, as the first rays of dawn pierced the mists of the Bulgarian mountains, thousands of beetles beat their wings in unison, a dense, thunderous drone driving every soul into a fresh cycle of exhaustion. Trailing at the absolute rear of the swarms, Os flew slower and slower. Watching his comrades shatter their carapaces merely to secure a fleeting position, an immense wave of desolation and profound sympathy washed over him. His physical frame still harbored a fearsome, formidable strength, but his soul felt as though it had been severely scalded on that burning afternoon. He no longer desired to use his hard exterior to inflict harm upon any living thing, least of all, himself. The hierarchy within the Rose Valley was invisible yet unyielding. Beetles deemed insufficiently strong were exiled to the sunless roots of the brushwood, forced to survive on decaying leaf litter, a low-tier struggle for survival replayed day after day. OS began to deliberately shun the most sun-drenched, competitive central flower beds. Instead, he frequented a grove of ancient, uncultivated Damascus roses tucked away in the deepest recesses of the valley at twilight. The roses there were spared from manicured pruning. They grew tall with interlocking branches, each blossom carrying a stoic serenity born of weathering time, their petals displaying a muted, elegant, and understated shade of pink. During these long, solitary journeys, he began to notice details he had once blindly bypassed. He came to understand the first nocturnal cry of a nightingale under the moon, and felt the exquisite texture of the breeze combing through his antennae. He formed a silent bond with a mature Damascus rose blooming beside a crumbling stone wall. Its fragrance was incomparably pure and rich, bearing a soothing herbal tone capable of smoothing away all spiritual anguish. Whenever OS landed weary upon its sepals in the dying rays of dusk, the rose would gracefully unfurl its outer pink petals, tenderly enveloping his dust-laden, scarred metallic body within its core. In this microworld insulated from conflict, where only absolution remained, OS had no need to play the invincible general. Cradled within this noble, calming aroma, he simply rediscovered the true, safe rhythm of his own breath. Autumn in Bulgaria always arrives without warning. A freezing mountain wind swept away the remaining restlessness of summer overnight, infusing the atmosphere with the crisp chill of vegetation veering toward winter sleep. To the beetles of the valley, this was the most perilous and merciless season. As temperatures plummeted, their blood would gradually stiffen, forcing a frantic race to find a secure winter burrow before total freeze set in. It was the final day of the human harvest season. Before the morning mist had even dispersed, the crisp melodies of peasant women and the heavy swaying of wicker baskets echoed from afar, the ultimate plundering of the valley. Perched upon his ancient Damascus rose, OS watched countless peers scatter blindly in sheer panic, engaging in a dignifiedless brawl merely to secure a warm crevice in a cottage wall. But OS did not stir. His antennae trembled slightly in the biting wind as he gazed at the rose beneath him, now overmature, its petal margins faintly tinged with yellow, and made the most serene decision of his life. The sky turned somber, heavy, leaden autumn clouds hung low over distant peaks, the air thick with the briny moisture and merciless pressure of an impending storm or early snow. The footsteps of the harvesters drew closer. Their weathered yet swift hands swept over the bushes, precisely plucking the oil-rich rose heads, casting them unceremoniously into the dark depths of their baskets. OS held fast to the flower center, his emerald shell losing its usual luster under the dull sky, straining every fiber to dissolve and become one with this rose that was about to face its destiny. When a pair of warm human hands finally reached for this rose by the old stone wall, the harvester seemed to notice the static, jade-colored beetle huddled within the core. Her movements paused in a curious hesitation. Perhaps moved by this silent vigil, or perhaps because the flower was already past its prime, those hands slowly receded, leaving this final Damascus rose untouched in the autumn wilderness. The songs faded into the distance, and the valley surrendered to a deathly stillness. Within this corner forgotten by the world, OS listened to his gradually slowing heartbeat, experiencing a sublime, unprecedented freedom. Midnight in the Rose Valley brought an exquisite silence, where even a falling leaf could be heard. Cleansed by the storm, the sky bloomed into a sacred midnight blue, the magnificent Milky Way scattering like crushed diamonds over the residual rose branches. OS lay in perfect stillness at the absolute core of the stamens. Though the temperature ebbed away with the deepening night, his freezing, rigid metallic body was bathed in a profound warmth radiating from an incredibly rich fragrance. This was the unreserved release of the Damascus rose at the threshold of its existence, an essential oil perfume, honey-sweet with a classical woody undertone, turning into thousands of invisible hands that gently massaged his aching joints. He tested his barbed legs and found that those sharp edges, worn and tattered from gripping adversaries in battle, were entirely useless amidst the velvet softness of the filaments. Had this occurred in the past, such immobility would have triggered his deepest survival panic, but in this sacred hour, within this ancient valley washed clean by moonlight, OS's soul experienced nothing but absolute tranquility. Those territories he once guarded as life itself, those glittering vanities beneath the sun, those relentless clashes performed to serve the rules of propagation, all dissolved into nothingness within this noble, restrained aroma. He was no longer a tool of combat bound to remain hard and defensive, he was merely an ordinary, blissfully exhausted traveler on a Bulgarian summer night, resting within his designated bed. The rose petals gleamed with their final luster in the night air, exhaling a blend of crisp apple and rich flora, slightly bitter at first touch, followed by infinite sweetness, possessing a mystical power to anchor the shifting spirit. OS slowly closed his compound eyes. The clamor of the material world stripped away entirely from his senses, he surrendered his battle-scarred emerald shell completely to the flower, melting into the silent winter night, the first pristine glint of dawn, bearing the bitter chill of the north, pierced the morning mist to illuminate this ancient Bulgarian valley that had witnessed infinite blooms and decays. A new day arrived precisely on schedule, unhindered by the departure of any soul. Deep within the heart of that ancient rose by the stone wall, OS lay in absolute stillness. Upon his emerald carapace, a few perfect beads of morning dew had gathered, glistening with a final, extraordinarily soft radiance under the weak light. Beside him, several weather-worn pink petals fulfilled their lifelong guard. They detached gently from the calyx and drifted downward under the pull of gravity, meticulously blanketing OS's miniature, unmoving form. He did not return to that cold, damp heap of rocks where beetles brawled for dominance, he returned himself, unreservedly, to this noble soil that had birthed him, healed him, and raised these majestic Damascus roses. The enigma of why he chose to remain alone amidst the final harvest on the bitterest day would never be understood by his peers in the forest, they would merely employ the cold logic of natural selection to footnote his departure. Yet to this vast prairie, and to that specific aroma of Damascus rose that had kept him company through the dead of night, OS had left behind a secretive, epic ballad of surrender, of trust, and of discovering one's true home. Through his ultimate choice, he proved to a clamorous world that the grandest nobility in life is sometimes not how many rivals you conquer with a hardened exterior, but having the courage, at the perfect moment, to shed all defenses and permit oneself to stop and sleep. The breeze swept through once more, and the bare branches of the Rose Valley exhaled their final, most introverted fragrance under the morning sun, carrying away all residual anxiety and weariness, leaving only an eternal silence tailored for the slumber of all restless souls. Now, this tale of the duel between armor and tenderness has reached its destination, and that fragrance of Damascus rose, laden with the temperature of the Bulgarian evening breeze, seems to be drifting softly into your fingertips, melting against your pillow. The world outside has surrendered to an absolute hush. Relinquish all attachments, all defenses, and all heavy burdens, like the little scarab beetle who found his destination within the petals, let yourself drift into a peaceful, deep, and heavy sleep.